Hello and welcome to Educo Motivation. In this video, you'll learn all about the law of compensation, one of the 12 laws of the universe and the 8th in our series. You'll discover the power of contribution and why it ultimately determines your level of compensation. If you ever wanted a surefire strategy to make a lot more money, this video is for you. Keep up to date with our latest videos by hitting subscribe and turning on notifications. Please show your support by clicking like. So let's get started. The law of compensation, one of the 12 laws of the universe, decrees that you will always be compensated commensurate with your contribution. In effect, you reap what you sow. Your rewards will always be in direct proportion to the service you render to others. As Nikola Tesla put it, "My belief is firm in a law of compensation. The true rewards are ever in proportion to the labor and sacrifices made." This law is often referred to as the law of reciprocity because when you put something out, it comes back in other ways. People will always reciprocate in kind for whatever you do to and for them. You can see this in action when someone does something for you, you feel compelled to do something for them. In other words, you will be compensated for everything you do. All the effort you make, the actions you take, the things you say, the intentions you set, all culminate in the compensation you receive. If your efforts are focused on putting a lot of good out, the universe will compensate you accordingly. You increase your compensation if you increase the value of your contribution. Conversely, the less you put in, the less the universe will return to you. If you put out negativity, annoyance, frustration, anger, and resentment, the universe will compensate you with more of the same. You cannot do wrong without suffering wrong. You need to be more mindful of what you are putting out. Realize that what you do affects what you get. As Emerson put it, "Thou shalt be paid exactly for what thou hast done, no more, no less." So if you don't like what you're getting, change what you're giving. The universe doesn't judge, it merely compensates you fairly and appropriately for what you're putting out. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay on compensation in 1841. In it, he likened the universe to a mathematical equation which must be balanced. He said, "Every secret is told, every crime is punished, every virtue rewarded, every wrong redressed, in silence and certainty." In other words, you cannot get anything without giving something first. And whatever you give is returned in like nature, measure, and veracity. Put differently, whatever you put in, you get out. Put a lot in, you get a lot out. Put a little in, you get a little out. You get what you give, however little, however much. If you give more, you will get more, and if you give little, you will get little. So if you put huge effort into your career, relationships, health and finances, then you will get a lot in return. But if you put less into any of these areas, then you will be disappointed. Put nothing in, you get nothing out. Realize too that compensation comes in many different forms. As Emerson noted, when he is pushed, tormented, defeated, he has a chance to learn something. He has been put on his wits, on his manhood. He has gained facts, learns his ignorance, is cured of the insanity of conceit, has got moderation and real skill. So keep an open mind and accept compensation whatever way it arrives. Newton's cradle is a perfect representation of the law of compensation. It's a device that demonstrates the conservation of momentum and energy with swinging spheres. When one sphere at the end is lifted and released, it strikes the stationary spheres, transmitting a force through the stationary spheres that pushes the last sphere upward. The last sphere swings back and strikes the nearly stationary spheres, repeating the effect in the opposite direction. The measure of the reaction is equal and opposite to the action. Put a little energy in, and the balls move a little. Put a lot of energy in, and the balls move a lot. Well, this concept holds true across the full spectrum of life activities. Every thought, action, belief, and expectation in your life has an equal and opposite reaction. No matter what you do, whether good or bad, you are sure to be compensated for it one way or the other. In fact, this rule of compensation is unbreakable. That is why get-rich-quick schemes don't work. You can never put a little in and get a lot out. The only people making money from get-rich-quick schemes are those that create them. They put the time in, they get a lot out. Likewise, don't waste your time playing the lottery. Not only have you a better chance of being struck by lightning, but the law of compensation will likely take back anything you win. Statistically, most lottery winners are right back to where they started within 3 years. They obtained a lot of money by putting very little in, therefore the law of compensation took it right back. They simply didn't put in the time and effort to develop a mindset conducive to wealth creation and retention. This is only acquired through hard craft, dogged determination, and personal experience. In effect, you only get out what you put in. In fact, the law of compensation is a sub-law of the law of sowing and reaping. In effect, you cannot reap great fortunes unless you have sown great deeds in advance. In other words, whatever you are reaping today is a measure of what you have sown in the past. If you want to reap something substantial in the future, you have to sow something substantial in the present. You can't go to the great stove of life and say, "Give me some heat and then I'll give you some wood." It doesn't work that way. People are forever cursing the circumstances they find themselves in today without realizing they're getting exactly what they sowed in the past. In effect, the universe delivers exactly what you have ordered. The universe does not mind how big your order is. It just cares that you are willing to put in the effort up front. The law of compensation always rewards you today commensurate with the deeds you have sown in the past. In this context, your future prosperity is entirely dependent on what you are doing today. However, a word of warning. You need to guard yourself against frustration if you are working diligently and still waiting for success to show. As Emerson said, the longer you put in without getting out, the greater will be your return when it finally comes. Perhaps Earl Nightingale said it best when he said, "The amount of money or good you receive is going to be in direct ratio to the need for what you do, your ability to do it, and the difficulty there will be in replacing you." So really think inside the framework of Earl's definition. Is there a need for what you do? Are people willing to pay you for your efforts? The golden law of entrepreneurship is to find a need and fill it. The bigger the need, the greater the compensation. The fastest way to find a need is to identify a problem and provide a solution to that problem. As Zig Ziglar puts it, you can have anything you want in life if you just help enough people to get what they want. Everybody is looking for solutions to their problems. They will happily compensate you if you help them to solve these problems. In effect, all fortunes begin with the sale of personal services. If you wish to increase the size of your rewards, you must first increase the quality and quantity of your service. Secondly, how well do you do what you do? The problem is most people contribute just enough to survive. The reason most people get average results is average performance. They do enough to just get by, and as a result, they get enough to just get by. You have to realize that if you want to get more out, then you have to put more in. Throughout his book Outliers, The Story of Success, Malcolm Gladwell discusses the concept of the 10,000 hours rule. He asserts that the key to achieving true expertise in any skill is simply a matter of practicing, albeit in the correct way, for at least 10,000 hours. If you put in this level of effort and sustain it, then you have what it takes to perform at exceptional levels. You could become a professional at this very endeavor. Furthermore, you need to practice what Tony Robbins calls CANI, which is an acronym for Constant and Never-Ending Improvement. Eric Hoffer put across similar views when he observed, "In times of change, learners inherit the earth. while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. In other words, realize that learning never stops. You need to have a perpetual thirst for knowledge. You need to read every day in your field. You need to keep getting better and never cease striving for more. You have to contribute substantial time and energy up front if you want to gain substantial compensation thereafter. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You sow in one season, you reap in another. You never sow and reap in the same season. You simply must be willing to do all the work up front with the expectation that the compensation is coming down the tracks. Thirdly, how difficult would it be to replace you at the work you do? Average people are easily replaced because average people are easy to find. Conversely, if you are exceptional at what you do, then you are difficult to replace. If you are difficult to replace, then your stock goes up and you command far higher compensation. In order to become exceptional in your field, you need to commit to excellence in everything you do. You need to look for ways to add value and exceed the expectations of others. You also need to realize that the law of compensation embodies an opportunity cost. As Emerson postulated, for everything you have missed, you have gained something else, and for everything you gain, you lose something else. What you need to realize is that we cannot have successes without failures or hardships without gains. In effect, your priorities in life determine the polarity of your compensation. Those that put work ahead of family will gain success in monetary terms, but often lose their family. Those that drink and smoke to excess may have a great social life, but often lose their health. Those that have a high-fat diet enjoy tasty food, but often lose their lives. Those that get up early to go to the gym lose sleep, but gain fitness. So the law of compensation triggers a perpetual cycle of gain and loss. You need to be careful so that what you gain is greater than that which you lose. If you wish to maximize the law of compensation in your life, then make a deliberate effort to put more effort into things that matter and less effort into things that don't. Feed the things that advance you, starve the things that hinder you. Realize that sacrifice is an input. Sacrifice is part of the price you pay in advance. You need to sacrifice lower order goals in order to achieve higher order goals. So are you willing to make great sacrifices to achieve great goals? One way to fine-tune your decision-making ability in this area is to adopt a longer time perspective. The long view sharpens the short view. Make all decisions in the present through the lens of a long-time perspective. Ask yourself, what are the long-term consequences of the decision I'm about to make? Making decisions in this way puts you in harmony with the law of compensation. Furthermore, go beyond compensation and leverage the law of overcompensation. Put in more than you take out. Look for opportunities to exceed expectations. Shift your focus from what you will get to what you can give, and the law of compensation will take care of the rest. When you put more in, when you do more than expected, the universe responds with exceptional levels of compensation. Remember, everything was a thought before it became a thing. Fill your mind with thoughts, visions, and ideas of success, and you will be compensated by those positive experiences. Focus your attention on instituting the causes consistent with the effects you wish to enjoy. As Emerson put it, cause and effect, means and ends, seed and fruit cannot be severed, for the effect already blooms in the cause, the end pre-exists in the means, the fruit in the seed. So find ways to contribute more to the world through your thoughts, feelings, and actions, and the effect will bring you great fulfillment. You need to understand that the law of compensation does not refer exclusively to money. On the contrary, it applies to everything in life. In effect, you sow a pain to reap a gain, or you sow a gain to reap a pain. Allow me to elaborate further. So if you sow a pain to reap a gain, then you are making a short-term sacrifice to realize a long-term benefit. You are practicing delayed gratification, and it's a key part of the law of compensation. The pain might be sacrificing TV time for time spent writing your new book. The gain is all those royalty checks you are going to earn for the rest of your life. The pain might be sacrificing the new car today so that you can buy a rental property instead. The gain is the passive income that will flow forevermore and eventually pay for the car anyway. This way you get the asset, the rental property, and the liability, the flash car. The pain might be pulling and straining muscles in the gym. The gain would be developing a toned physique that boosts your self-esteem. Conversely, let's consider a few examples for sowing a gain, reaping a pain. The gain might be the short-term high you get from taking illegal substances. The pain might be the long-term damage it's doing to your health. The gain might be the confidence you get from drinking alcohol. The pain will be the hangover and the potential long-term damage to your liver. The gain might be the pleasure you get from driving a new car. The pain would be the monthly repayments. In this context, you should always consider the pain-gain ratio when determining any course of action. If you commit to put more in than you intend to take out, the universe will give you more than it takes away. Our modern system of compensation includes trading time for money, trading money for time, or trading money for money. Virtually every form of monetary compensation we receive is attributed to these three routes. The vast majority of people trade time for money. They work for a wage that compensates them for a predetermined dollar value per hour worked. The size of that wage is determined by the need for what they do, how well they do it, and the difficulty in replacing them. The problem is that this form of compensation is always limited by time. Considering one is paid by the hour, and there are just 24 hours in a day, then there is always a ceiling on the amount of money that can be earned. The law of compensation states that every loss has its gain, so in this context you are losing time but gaining money. The effects are multiplied if you choose to work for yourself. You need to put in considerably more time up front with little if any compensation. However, time will trigger the law of compensation and you will receive compensation commensurate with all the time invested. The second way to trigger compensation is to trade money for time. You can buy other people's time by compensating them for their efforts. In this context, you could outsource tasks for which you lack adequate competencies. The law of compensation states that every loss has its gain, so in this context you are losing money but gaining time. The third way to trigger compensation is to trade money for money. You can invest in assets that generate passive income. In this context, you could invest in stocks or real estate and generate residual income in the form of dividends, rental income, and capital appreciation. The benefit to this form of compensation is that you can replicate it as often as you like, thus there is no ceiling on your earning potential. The law of compensation states that every loss has its gain, so in this context you are spending money up front, but potentially gaining considerably more in the longer term. The smart play is to employ leverage to induce a multiplier effect on the compensation you receive. Regardless of what you do, you will need to initiate the process by trading time for money. However, the smart play is to focus your time on creating leveraged assets. So save 9 months' worth of living expenses from your current wage-paying job. This gives you the security and the peace of mind to change direction. All the while be working on the side to create a leveraged asset. A leveraged asset could include building a business, writing a book, creating a mailing list, investing in a franchise, developing a software service, or anything else that has the inbuilt ability to generate multiple streams of passive income. When you have 9 months' worth of living expenses saved from your job, take a career break to focus on completing and launching your leveraged asset. Not all leveraged assets are created equal. Books provide royalties which flow ad infinitum without further input from you. A business, on the other hand, will require continual input from you. You should in turn take the funds generated by your leveraged assets and invest them in stocks or real estate. This tactic maximizes leverage because you are no longer trading time for money, but instead making money work for you. However, I must make a disclaimer here. You do so at your own risk. investing in the stock market or in real estate is a form of speculation. You reduce the risks by doing your own due diligence, investing in the necessary education, and by seeking counsel from proven experts in these fields. If you don't take the time to do comprehensive due diligence and to get expert advice, then you could lose your money. Keep up to date with our latest videos by hitting subscribe and turning on notifications. Please show your support by clicking like. Be sure to click the next video on your screen right now. This features the next law in our series, the Law of Relativity. It reveals the power of comparability and how we use it to both our detriment and our betterment every single day. If you ever wanted to feel greater happiness and contentment, this video is a must-watch.